Today we have 3 stories that may sound unreal, but are true. And you may even ask, what are the odds of that? After hearing a few of these stories, so stick around and we hope you enjoy. First up, in December of 2011, on a road in the woods of northern Sweden, a man named Peter was traveling when his car slid off of the road, and due to the amount of snow, his car was stuck in a drift. His car became covered in the snow and he was trapped inside of his vehicle. He had nothing to eat or drink inside, so he would only survive with a few handfuls of snow that he could manage to scoop up. For 2 months he stayed trapped inside of the car, until one day in February of 2012, around 2 months after he first slid off the road, someone on a snowmobile traveling down the road spotted the car and decided to scrape the snow off the windshield of the vehicle. The snowmobile driver saw movement inside of the car and found Peter huddled inside of a sleeping bag with not much energy and barely able to speak. He was taken to the hospital where he was obviously suffering from severe hypothermia and malnourished. But remarkably, he would eventually recover from this ordeal. How did he survive for so long in the cold with no food and just a few handfuls of snow in sub-zero temperatures? One theory that was brought up was that Peter must have went into some kind of human hibernation, which slowed down his metabolism and allowed him to survive the ordeal. There have also been talks about the igloo effect of the snow might have had on his car to keep him from freezing to death. Let us know what you think down below. And now for story number 2. There was a young girl who was attending her grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary, and there she released a balloon into the air with a note attached that asked whoever found it to return it back. And a little less than 2 weeks go by when she did indeed receive a letter back. The balloon had been found approximately 150 miles away. It landed in the field of a man named Andy Rivers. Andy would then read the note, and he decided to give the balloon and the note to his neighbor's little girl. So, why did he choose to give it to the neighbor's little girl instead of returning it as the note said? Well, in a way he did. You see, the little girl who originally released the balloon at her grandparents' anniversary party was named Laura Buxton. And, as fate would have it, the little girl who lived next door to Andy was also named Laura Buxton. Andy had read the note, and the note said return to Laura Buxton, so, in a way, he did, just not the right one. And so this Laura did as the note asked, and she returned it along with a note of her own. The two ended up getting in contact with each other over the telephone, and the parents arranged a meetup for the girls to see each other. And now this is where it gets even more interesting. You see, after talking for a bit, the two girls had more in common than just having the same name. Both were indeed named Laura Buxton, but also both were 10 years old, both had the same eye color, both were the same height, and their hair was very similar. But not just the name and appearance. Also, both girls had pretty much the exact same pets. Each had a guinea pig, a rabbit, and a 3-year-old black lab. And so I asked, what are the odds of all of the similarities between the two young girls living 150 miles apart? Let us know down in the comment section what you think. And for the last story for this episode, we will go back to the year of 1950 on a Wednesday at around 7:25 p.m. at the West Side Baptist Church in Beatrice, Nebraska. An explosion occurred and demolished the building. Now at this particular church, Church choir practice always started at 7:20 in the evening on Wednesdays, which would be just 5 minutes before the explosion. However, every one of the 15 members of the choir who were going to practice that night were not harmed at all. Why or how did they remain uninjured? It turns out, by coincidence or fate or whatever term you wish to use, all 15 members were uncharacteristically late for practice, and all for different reasons. Not just 1 or 2 members late, but all. The Reverend had went by the church and lit the furnace in preparation for choir practice earlier in the evening. It was chilly, and he wanted to make sure that things were ready for practice, and he knew that most members normally would arrive around 7:15, and then he heads home for dinner. And about the time to leave for choir practice, the Reverend and his wife were preparing their 18-month-old daughter and noticed his daughter's dress was soiled. So his wife ironed another, and he waited until the ironing was done. So this is why they were late for practice, and they were still at home when the explosion occurred. The choir director, Mrs. Paul, was late because her daughter, Marilyn, who was also the choir's pianist, wouldn't get up from a nap she had taken after they ate dinner. She finally shakes her and she gets up around 7:15, and they only had minutes to get ready before practice, but with her mother waiting so they could leave together, they heard the blast. Roena and Sadie Estes started to practice early, but their car would not start, so they had called LaDonna Vandergift to ask her for a ride. But LaDonna, who was a high school sophomore at the time, was doing her homework and had a difficult geometry problem she was trying to solve before heading out. This is why these three were not on time. Lucille Jones and Dorothy Wood would normally go to practice together, but this particular evening, Lucille was listening to a radio program, and she was intent to stay and listen until the end of the program. This was on until 7:30. It was not like either of the girls to be late for practice, but Dorothy waited for Lucille until the radio program was finished, which was after the blast. Mrs. Schuster and her daughter Susan left early because she had to make one stop before going to practice. Her mother had to prep for a missionary meeting and needed help, so Mrs. Schuster and little Susan went to help and were delayed. Herbert was actually running a little ahead, but then he remembered an unfinished letter that was very important to him, and he sat down to finish it. He wanted to mail it on his way to choir practice, but he was still at his desk when the explosion occurred. Harvey was looking after his 2 boys while his wife was away for the evening, and getting them ready and organized was taking a little longer than usual, and so they would be late. Joyce Black, who lived just across the street from the church, said she was just feeling plain lazy. It was cold in the evening, and she was huddled up in her warm house, waiting until the last possible moment to go to practice. And she was almost ready to go out when the explosion happened. And there were others who just couldn't think of a reason for not being on time. They were just late. Now, as for the official cause of the explosion, following an investigation by the local fire marshal, firemen would theorize that a gas leak caused it, and the vapor had been ignited by the furnace. The roof collapsed, and the walls exploded outwards. It destroyed the windows of nearby buildings, and took a nearby radio station off the air. The explosion was so severe that it would have no doubt killed anyone who had been inside. So, how is it, do you think, that 15 choir members, who normally would have all arrived early, were not in the building at the time of the explosion? Was it just a coincidence of a series of unrelated events? Was it a work of divine intervention? We will leave that for you to decide. Drop a comment down below and tell us what you think of these 3 stories. And if you like this type of content, please hit the like button. And if you are brand new here, we would love for you to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you can be notified when we upload new content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.